My name's Cliff Clayson. This is my Bn Sports BLS RX7 behind me. I've been drifting for about 15 years. I guess it all started for me with motorbikes. I used to love working on motorbikes. I had an RM80 and that's what sort of got me into the whole motors scene and working on cars. From there I met a few guys in Adelaide who were into their rotaries and they helped me to purchase my first car. So my first car was a Mazda RX4 Coupe, 1974 model. We actually bought it as a repairable write-off. It had been smashed in the front, and we took it to my grandma's house. I got it for $2,000. We took it to my grandma's house, and a few of my friends and myself, we pulled the front out on the Stobie pole out the front of my grandma's house. And back then you were able to go straight to the wreckers and get whatever parts you wanted. So we went to the local wreckers down there in Gawler and got the new bonnet and bumper, and yeah, I had my first street car when I was 16 and a half. So from there, I guess I got into the high performance scene a little bit after that. I mean, the Adelaide street scene here was pretty good. You know, the Adelaide International Raceway that was Anzac Highway back in the day. You know, all of my friends had high performance cars, so I started off with a Mazda RX7 Series 4. It was a non-turbo. And that's where I sort of got into drifting because, it was an automatic and I blew the automatic up from doing too many burnouts. And then we put a manual conversion in it and welded the diff, and we started hitting up all the industrial areas around Adelaide and hitting up the hills. And I actually had a couple of good friends who are still in the drift scene here in Adelaide now that sort of taught me how to drift. I sold that car and upgraded to a Series 4 RX7 13B turbo, and from there we started building that car up. So I, did the turbo upgrade, did the computer upgrade. We put the Cusco two-way in it, put the coilover suspension on it, and once again still hitting up the streets. But then drifting started to take off in Adelaide, so we started to have more track days at Malala Motorsport Park and at Adelaide International Raceway, so we were able to go out to the track pretty regularly. From there, I started doing drift schools, so I did a couple of drift schools with the guys like James Verhoomis. Back in the day, James Verhoomis was, one of the OGs of drifting. I think he really brought drifting to Australia and set it up for us and what we have now. So I did a fair few drift schools with the guys like James Verhoomis and Kelly McKinnon, Lyndon Reynolds, all those guys. So they were all the OGs back in the day. Yeah, so I did a couple of drift schools and started to get good at drifting, and I thought, it's about time that I started to step up rather than just doing it on the street. I mean, the street was always good, but you really needed to step it up to enter into a competition. I mean, it's a big step. So we started doing G1 out at Malala, and it was tough competition back then. All the good drivers were in G1, so it wasn't an easy comp. And to be stepping it up with the big boys, I mean, for me, it was pretty nerve-wracking. And then we had a national season that started up, which was a national competition start-up, which was Drift Australia. And so Drift Australia was a 5-round competition that was Australia-wide. So they had a round pretty much in every state, including Tasmania. We had a go at that 2007, 2008. I think I finished full season in 2008. I finished 6th overall in the Super Drift. So we weren't running the full pro season, it was just the pro-am season. But it was still a lot of fun, man. I loved travelling around Australia and doing all the tracks and hanging out with all the people and partying. It was just awesome. So I campaigned the Series 4-5 RX7 right up until the start of 2009. and it was a good chassis, but I was looking for something more. I mean, obviously the FD, well, the FD for me was my dream car. I knew straight away when I first bought my RX7 that I wanted an FD. It had to be an FD. So 2009, I had an opportunity to buy this car behind me, but back then it was just a red street car that I picked up as a rolling shell. It had no motor and gearbox, and was a full car, complete interior and stuff like that. And from there I knew that I wanted to build the most ultimate RX7 that you possibly could. I mean, it was going to take time, but it wasn't something you were going to do in a year or 2 years. You had to build it slowly. So we kicked it off end of 2009, started partying out my Series 4, and yeah, started building the FD. So I basically stripped the car back to a bare shell. We took it to Walker Chassis. They did a full strut-to-strut cage in it. From there, we picked the body kit. So at the time, it was an Origin body kit. So we had the Origin front and rear wide fenders with the Origin stylish body kit. And I was running at the time a Night Sports bonnet. We took it to the paint shop. A friend of mine, Joey at Pro Finish, helped me choose the colour. I knew that I wanted to go wild with the colour, so we picked this like rainbow flake. I love blue because my FC was blue, so I wanted to stick with the blue colour, but I wanted something that popped, so we went with a like a House of Colour rainbow flake. Once we got it into the shop and it was painted, we got it back to Rev's Performance Rotary, where we started the assembly process. Jason at Revs was a big part of the build process as far as the driveline was concerned. At the time, the best engine package we could come up with was a Bridgeport 13B. I had to go dog box with this car, so we built the engine. I bought a Albin's 5-speed gearbox, which was a 1st to 5th dog box. We installed that. The turbo that we went for at the time was a Garrett GT3540. We then brought it here to Garage 7, and the guys here at Garage 7 did all the wiring, so they did a full body loom, did the tune on the car, ended up making around the 400 kilowatt mark, and then we started drifting it. So I'd campaigned the car for a couple of years with that body kit, the Origin body kit and the Bridgeport. But then new technology came out as far as the semi-PP, and at the end of sort of 2015, we pulled the car down for another complete rebuild. And at that time, I was in talks with Bn Sports, who's a good friend of the Australian distributor, who's a good friend of mine, Michael Ginn at Dorry Junkie. I'd seen the body kit unveiled at the Tokyo Auto Salon, and I knew straight away that was the body kit that we had to have. I mean, it was just wild. It was the wildest FD I'd ever seen. So we had a couple of conversations, and big thank you to Dorry Junkie. We made it happen, and it consists of the front bar, the fenders, the rear fenders, which are integrated into the side skirts. It has a swan neck rear GT wing, which is unique to that body kit. No other body kits have this GT swan neck wing. Once we had the body kit fitted and we had the vinyl done, it was then pick the wheels. And of course I had to find wheels that were, wide enough to fill out those rear guards on that, because we're talking, like I said, it's nearly 2 meters wide on the rear. And so I got the specs from Bn Sports in Japan of what they ran on their Japanese version of the Bn Sports BLS. And they were like, they were running 19s, but it was like 19 by 11.5 neg 40. And I'm like, man, where am I going to get wheels that would suit that? So I did a bit of research and found that the TE37s in the TE37 Vs in 18s they made them right up to an 11.5 with a neg 40 offset. So I was like, that's perfect. So straight away, I ordered 2 sets of them from Japan. We got them back here, got the Velino rubber on them, so the 265 35 Velinos, the Pergias. Got them bolted on, and man, it was just the perfect offset for the rear. Front wise, I had my set of TE37s, the polished TE37s. We put them on the front and they stuck out a little bit because of the offset. But I was happy with the look. It was chrome on the front, chrome on the rear, and then the sticker kit with all of the sponsors and everyone that's helped me to build the car to what it is. They had to be chrome as well because it just matched the chrome on chrome. Interior wise, running Velo seats, which is South Australian made, and they're the best seats you can get as far as I'm concerned. We're running a Sure Fab shifter kit for my sequential. That was made by the boys over in New Zealand. They sent it over. It's an excellent bit of gear. Dash, on the dash, we've got the standard OEM Mazda dash, but we've run Angry Panda carbon fiber cluster and carbon fiber bezel for the center console. On the carbon fiber fascia, we're running a AIM dash, Strata dash, and all of the vitals come from the motor and from the link are shown on that dash. So it's an incredible bit of gear and in full color as well. The roll cage was made by Walker Chassis. It's a strut-to-strut roll cage which has all of your had all of the side intrusion bars, but I got a couple of additions made by Admo Fab. We put in a ladder bars on the sides, and we also changed above the roof, on the roof lining, we put some extra bars in there, just because my helmet was hitting on a couple of the bars when I was drifting. In the rear, we actually had the OEM tyre well cut out, and it's been flat floored. Underneath all that has all of my fuel system, like my surge tank and my oil coolers and my gearbox cooler and my fuel cooler. All of that's hidden underneath that flat floor. Inside the car, behind the driver's seat, there's also custom made fuel tanks. So back at Revs Performance Rotary, we had an idea to run twin fuel cells, which is normally where the back seats would be for the passengers, but we actually took the back seats out, obviously, because the interior is stripped, and we made the tanks to sit inside those passenger seat wells. They're twin 25 litre fuel cells, which are connected by a like a dash 20 line between the two. Each one has a Walbro pump, lift pump inside, which pumps externally to my surge tank. And then from there, I've got twin 044s, which feeds the engine. As I said previously, the engine's a 13B semi-PP, but the engine block itself has a fair bit of work done to it, substantial work done to it. With the help of Jason at Revs Performance Rotary and Rowan Ambrose at Extreme Rotaries, we went ahead and got the rotating assembly balanced and blueprinted. The rotors are CNC machined, so the baths are all CNC'd so that the combustion are all even. Once that's done, then the rotating assembly is balanced, and we've had the crank isotropic coated, so it's been specially coated. Then the housings are brand new housings that we bought direct from Mazda. They have been semi-PP'd, so the standard OEM water inlets on the housings get turned into an inlet for the combustion, and it's a 25mm semi-PP port. The irons, the outer irons, are all standard port that have just been a little bit die grinded to make them an extend port. Then the whole engine stud kitted. It's got a 12mm stud kit through it. You know, that as a block itself, there's the amount of work that goes just to make that block. I mean, that's basically a drag motor that we're running in this car. From there, you've got the exhaust manifold, which is made in-house here at Garage 7. The exhaust manifold was made out of steam pipe, and we run a priority gate setup on it. So the runners for the external gate come straight off of the manifold directly in front of the ports, which makes it easy for us to control boost. On the end of the gate runners is a Turbo Smart 60mm gate, and obviously the turbo is the Borg Warner 8374 EFR, which is twin scrolled. We're actually in the process of upgrading that to a 9182 twin scroll, just because the motor flows that much air that we really need to be able to push more air through the motor. And the current turbo that we're running actually makes boost on idle, believe it or not. Like, it makes boost on idle. So if we go up to the bigger turbo, we'll gain probably about 500 RPM in lag, I suppose you could call it. It's not very much, but it'll just aid in the engine to be able to make full power quicker. So from the Turbo Smart 60mm gate, we run a screamer straight out the bonnet. Had to have that. All the cars that I've seen that run the screamer out the bonnet, I just love seeing flames out the bonnet. From the back of the turbo, it's a straight 4-inch system, stainless steel system right through, with a MagnaFlow exhaust system on the rear. Not that it does much, but yeah, she's pretty aggressive. On the engine externally, we're looking at a Rotary Works 90mm throttle body, which feeds the OEM inlet, upper and lower intake manifolds. We run a Night Sports V-mount kit, which does the cooling. It's basically a Koyo N-Flow mounted on the V-mount with a Koyo intercooler. We're actually looking to upgrade that. We're going to be going to a drive-by-wire setup with a Bosch Motorsport 82mm E-throttle, and we're also upgrading the intercooler. So the intercooler's probably about a 235 by 300mm intercooler. We're going to double that size, so we're going up to a 600mm intercooler, same width, but it's going to be 100mm thicker as well, because we're actually getting a little bit high intake temps. Now that we're pushing, 430 kilowatts at the wheels with this semi-PP motor, the intercooler is just getting heat soaked basically, so we really need a bigger intercooler just to help cool those intake temps. Yeah, so once we go up to that bigger intercooler, it'll definitely drop the intake temps. I mean, that's the only problem we've really had with the car as far as the reliability is the intake temps, just because this intercooler is only made for a street car. So once we put the bigger intercooler on, it'll make that so much better. We also run twin 30-row oil coolers on the front. So the 30-row oil coolers are a bit of an overkill for the car, but keeping the oil cool is paramount with the Rotary. So we only ever see intake oil temps up around the 82 to 84 degrees, which is perfect for this car. That means you can thrash it all day long and you don't have any drama with it. So moving away from the engine to the suspension, recently we've been able to lock in a deal with Wisteria Kick Blue. So the Kick Blue suspension is actually a DG5 suspension that then gets sent over to Wisteria, and Wisteria set it up specifically for drifting. So thank you to Drift Samurai. He helped us secure the deal with DG5 and Wisteria Kick Blue, and we installed them right before World Time Attack last year. So that suspension is just incredible. It's literally the best suspension you can get for drifting. We originally started off with a couple of different suspension components to get extra lock with the FD. Believe it or not, we had JZA80 Supra upper arms, and the lower arms were actually cut and shut to give you more lock. We had about 40mm extra added into the lower control arms on each side. We were running a super now rose jointed tie rod end and extra long toe arms. We're also running 326 power knuckles made by Haraguchi himself. And that setup actually gave us a fair bit of lock. I was pretty happy with the setup, but unfortunately the cut and shut lower control arms just weren't strong enough for the kind of speed that we were doing, and so they were actually breaking the lower control arms because of the OEM alloy just wasn't strong enough to handle it. So we had to look for another option, and with Garage 7, they are obviously a distributor for Wisefab. They said that the new kit had come out for the FD, and so we just dropped the hammer on it and went for it. So the Wisefab kit has the longer lower control arms with their specially designed knuckles, and the amount of lock you get off of the Wisefab kit is incredible. I mean, it almost goes to 90 degrees each way, and I also upgraded the power steering. We still run the OEM factory steering rack, but I went away from the standard FD power steering pump because it just couldn't handle it. So we're running a Vectra power steering pump. It's a TRW brand power steering pump. And the beauty of the TRW brand power steering pump has actually got a bypass valve in it. So when you hit full lock, it doesn't stall the pump, it just keeps going. So it gives you plenty of lock. We move to the rear subframe. So I've got a standard rear subframe, but we run a Samaras subframe brace, which actually stops the front of the diff from lifting. It's common for a lot of LS converted RX7s, so we knew it had to be strong. But after putting the TTI in, the sequential gearbox, it actually deletes the power plant frame, which is the OEM brace that goes between the gearbox and the diff on the RX7s. So that got deleted, so we needed something to stop the diff from breaking, basically. So we put in the Samaras, the subframe, and we also run another brace that I had custom made underneath the diff. That actually stops the diff from splitting apart. So FD diffs are renowned for basically the crown wheel and pinion pushing apart and cracking the diff housing like an egg. So this frame goes underneath the diff, bolts the front of the diff and the back of the diff together, and just eliminates any risk of blowing a diff. Inside the diff we run a Cusco MZ two-way. I've always ran Cusco diffs. I always find that they are the strongest, and I've never had one break in all the years I've been drifting. They've always been reliable. Clutch wise, in front of the TTI we're running a direct clutch twin plate billet clutch with a light and flywheel. Once again, always run direct clutches, and they're strong and aggressive, but at the same time light underfoot, so makes for a good clutch kick. In the rear of the car we also have my gearbox cooler, which has an electric oil pump that circulates the oil from the TTI and goes through a 30-row oil cooler. We also run back there the surge tank, or the swell pot if you want to call it, and we also have a fuel cooler there as well. So that was something else that we found with the setup, is that we were cycling a lot of E85 and then it'd start to heat up. So the fuel cooler really makes a huge difference in the temperature of the fuel. And then that pretty much takes care of the rear of the car. So I'm Cliff Clayson. This is my Bn Sports BLS RX7, and you've been watching Build Bio, presented by YV Media.